What's up, guys? I'm EJ. I'm joined by Kendall, and thank you so much for checking out this episode of the Uncommitted podcast, episode 6. Kendall, this should be a really great show. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. So we got some big recruits heading to Alabama and Auburn, but we're not talking obviously about football. These are basketball recruits that are heading down to big names for the 2021 class. So we'll update you guys on those commitments. Also, two teams that are really rising up in the recruiting rankings after some new, recent commitments. One, your Memphis Tigers. Also, the Oregon Ducks. So we'll be talking about those teams later on in the show. So it should be action-packed podcast. Hope you guys will enjoy this listen. Kendall, what are you looking forward to talking about today?
Yeah, I mean, look, of course, I'd be lying if I wasn't excited to talk about these Memphis Tigers, who obviously Penny certainly doing something on the recruiting trail. A lot of people were worried what was the situation going to be like post Mike Miller being gone. And look, Penny and Cody Topper, Tony Madlock, that old staff, they're short an assistant. They don't even have a replacement for Mike Miller yet. So we'll talk about all that when we get to that Memphis topic. But EJ, one of the things I wanted to mention to you before we got to our list of topics was that there was a 5-star who cut down his list recently. Michael Foster, 5-star out of Arizona, Hillcrest Prep. He cut down his list to a top 8, and his top 8 was very bizarre, to say the least. He not only did he not have 8 schools on his list, I believe he only had what was it, 3 or I mean, he had 4. I think he might have 5 schools because he had
four schools.
He had 4 schools,
and only 2 of them were major. Only 2 of them were major schools. And we got to talk about the player, by the way. It's Mike Foster.
Yeah, Michael Foster. Yeah, out of Arizona. I mean, and the kid's a very good player.
Yes,
power forward, athletic, strong. Gonna be an NBA player in the near future. But like you said, only 4 schools. Only two of them Power 5 schools. That being, who was it? Georgia and Florida State.
Yeah, Georgia and FSU.
Georgia and Florida State, not Blue Bloods, for either. But then he also had Grambling, and he had Western Illinois. On top of that, he also had the G League, as well as Germany, China.
Yeah, he had 3 countries.
Really?
Yeah,
he had 3 countries on there.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna make a bold prediction and say Michael Foster is not gonna play a game of college basketball, but
it don't look like it.
I could be wrong, but I mean, typically we said it when it came to Jonathan Kuminga that anytime a guy puts the G League on his list,
it's a wrap.
Yeah, it's a wrap. He's not playing college basketball. So when a guy puts not only the G League but like every country not named the United States on his list, it probably means he's not playing college basketball. But
yeah, this is the first recruit I've ever seen have countries on his top list.
He put
multiple countries. Yeah,
he really put a map on his top 8. So look, shout out to Michael Foster. He's not gonna be hurt by not playing college basketball.
No.
He's gonna get his bag, and he'll be fine with that bag. But certainly an interesting list. Western Illinois, I'm interested to hear how they got on that list.
Yeah, because Grambling, I understood a little bit because we've seen shout out to Mikey Williams and the kid at Howard, McCord. But so in the HBCUs have gotten some more love in recent
most of these lists now that you see have one HBCU,
which is good, and I like to see that. And hopefully more of these guys take the plunge to commit. But yeah, I had to text you. I was like, what's the bulldog, the yellow bulldog? I literally didn't know what's his logo.
Yeah.
And I'm someone who lives and breathes college basketball, and I did not remember what logo that was.
Well, you see, I mean that's the effect of not having played a college basketball game in 10 years.
That's true, man.
The logos are different now. Yeah. Western those really small low majors, you'll forget what their logo is, or the logo is completely different now. It's a sad state of affairs.
Yeah. # bring back college hoops 2K. We need it, man.
I will say, speaking of college hoops, these teams like Western Illinois and Grambling are really going into the spirit of having playing a career mode or a dynasty mode where you're starting out at a small school and you're like, I'm gonna recruit the 5-star.
Yeah, this is like always like the stupidest strategy if you start off at a small school. If you're doing your legacy on college hoops, you're recruiting a McDonald All-American that has no chance to go into your school. Oh, yeah. And you may get in his top 10, but it doesn't matter. You're still not going to get the guy. Then you have to settle for like the 2-star JUCO because you got to fill out your roster.
Yeah, exactly.
These are the rookie mistakes. If you're running a legacy, you start from the bottom, man. That's not the move you should be doing. But let's get to the rest of the show. Shout out to Mike Foster. Good luck on his whether it's his college journey or his professional journey. If it starts in the G League or it starts overseas, good luck to him moving forward. And shout outs to all those schools and places that were nominated, I guess, or put in his top 8. But let's start again. Like I said at the top of the show, we're very accustomed to seeing Auburn and Alabama nab 5-star recruits on the gridiron. But both schools' basketball programs are now excited because they just nabbed 2 new top recruits. So point guard J.D. Davison announced he will be staying close to home. He's from Alabama, and now he announces he will be committing to the University of Alabama or Alabama University. It's one of them. I don't know which one. Meanwhile, Georgia power forward Jabari Smith, who's a top 5 player in this class, he announced he'd be heading to Auburn. I like both of these guys' games. J.D. Davison is one of the more explosive point guards you'll ever see. I mean, he looks like a future slam NBA champion if he makes it to the NBA and is that kind of player. And Jabari Smith, man, tell you what, he reminds me a lot of a player that I know pretty well, having seen him come up through the high school ranks and having played with him as a kid at 10 years old. He reminds me a lot of Tobias Harris. So
Curtis Kelly.
No, Curtis Kelly. I didn't play with or against Curtis Kelly. I don't know what you're talking about. Shout out to Curtis Kelly, former Rice High School great and UConn great.
Kansas State.
And he was at Kansas State. You're right. I forgot he transferred.
Yeah, man. But, he was on that team that lost to Holloway. Xavier.
To Holloway. Wow, what a name. But anyway, I think that Bruce Pearl saw that sees a lot of that in Jabari Smith. Yeah, that was definitely part of his recruitment. So, Kendall, these are 2 exciting players, 2 players that I think will generate a lot of buzz for these schools. Which player do you think will have the bigger impact for their school in their freshman year?
In their only year. No, I'm joking. So, it's tough because typically you would think a guard would have a bigger impact. First of all, shout out to Nate Oates, big get. J.D. Davison, a local guy, staying home. And obviously, Jabari Smith had a very, 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 very vast SEC recruitment. All the best schools in the SEC, pretty much outside of Kentucky, were putting up anything to get Jabari Smith. And for Bruce Pearl and Auburn to be the ones to get him shows you the momentum that his program has. Also shout out to Jabari Smith for not putting out a video saying "Go Eagles," like we saw from JT Thor when he committed to Auburn. But still, I think it's Jabari Smith. Obviously you think about the point guard and you think he's going to have the bigger impact just because the ball's going to be in his hands. But Jabari Smith is a more finished product than J.D. Davison. And J.D. Davison is very raw. He's going to have an impact because, like you said, the explosiveness is legitimate. Like you said, one of the most explosive point guards you'll ever see. Head above the rim on every drive. It's incredible. But he still has some things to round out in his game, whereas Jabari Smith seems like a guy that could be, 18-9, as a freshman, which leads him to being that type of a player. So, and being that type of an impact. Plus, Auburn is a better program right now. They're on fire when it comes to recruiting. Brought in a top 5 or 10 class this year with Sharif Cooper and JT Thor, like I mentioned. Had Isaac Okoro last season, who's going to be a top 10 pick. And now you bring in Jabari Smith. They've really circled that Georgia area because Isaac Okoro, an Atlanta kid, Sharif Cooper, an Atlanta kid, and now you get Jabari Smith from the Atlanta Celtics AAU program. It's a major thing, down south. Josh Pastner's had trouble keeping those guys at Georgia Tech. Tom Crean did a great job with Anthony Edwards, and I thought Jabari Smith was going to follow to Anthony Edwards to UGA, but great get for Auburn nonetheless. And I think that Sharif Cooper, Isaac Okoro line definitely helped.
Yeah, I do agree that it looks like Pearl is absolutely creating a pipeline with the Atlanta area to Auburn, and that's a massive coup. He's able to really create that pipeline because we know Atlanta Hoopers are fantastic, and you can get a lot of really great players out of that area. And I think that because Georgia and Georgia Tech just aren't solidified great destinations, I think a lot of it. That's why a lot of those guys end up going everywhere throughout the country. These Atlanta players. Whether it be Kentucky, whether it be Duke. I mean, we've seen them literally go anywhere. So
Cal.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, with Jaylen Brown. So I think that Pearl, Auburn football, when they've played well, when they've done well, they recruited in the Georgia area. Like Cam Newton's from Atlanta. So
yeah,
like that. So I think that if Bruce is trying to create a similar pipeline that we've seen Malzahn and Gene Chizik back in the day create for the basketball program, that would be really smart on his end. This is I think this is a little closer than you think. I probably would lean a little bit Jabari Smith only because his skill level is so impressive for his size. This guy's a legit 6'9", but can really shoot. It's a really good, mid-range, mid-post kind of game. And I just think that he looks like he's a player that is just continuing to develop. I don't think that he's anywhere near a finished product, so I think the potential is very high. But this guy, J.D. Davison, is electric, though. I mean, again, this guy gets in the open floor. I mean, look out. I don't know if I've seen a more athletic point guard. And I know that sounds hyperbole. A lot of times these high school kids, it's easy to jump and say, oh, this guy is the best athlete I've ever seen. But, he might be the best athletic point guard I've ever seen. I think the last guy I saw with this guy's hots is honestly Dennis Smith.
Yeah.
And then before Dennis Smith, I mean, you're probably talking John Wall. I mean, it's
Wall and Rose, yeah.
Yeah, and Derrick Rose, exactly, who was before John Wall. I mean, this guy is an explosive athlete. He's not the slickest with his handle. He's very fast, but I think that's probably where you probably see, okay, I see why he's not a top 5 guy or an obvious one and done guy necessarily, because he can shoot a little bit and he's very fast, but he's not like some guy that has some crazy handles. I don't look at him as a crazy great passer. No. He's your scoring kind of guard who's going to be looking to get to the rim. But as we've seen at Alabama recently, we've seen a lot of these guards, man. They go down there and they hoop, and he seems to be the kind of guy to fall right into that same pattern of Kyra Lewis, of Colin Sexton. Obviously, different coach, but still, I think he kind of sees what Alabama's building, kind of the reputation starting to have for point guard play, and I think that he may surprise people and end up having a really good freshman year.
Yeah, sometimes the last thing I'll say is that sometimes these point guards, like he may be a one and done, he may be a top 10 pick, like a Dennis Smith, Markel Fultz, like a Colin Sexton, but sometimes that doesn't translate into winning basketball games. And for Nate Oates, sometimes it doesn't matter. Like getting Colin Sexton, Avery Johnson getting Colin Sexton helped Nate Oates get J.D. Davison, despite the fact that Colin Sexton, won them like 18 games. Like the fact that he was a top 10 pick and was on SportsCenter every week was the reason why J.D. Davison, a kid from Alabama who's watching that, obviously very closely, sees Colin Sexton, sees Kyra Lewis, then follow and have 2 great years, now decides I'll be the next in line. So those things are important still, so it's not nothing to poo-poo, even if J.D. Davison does 1 year and Alabama's an NIT team. That's still, you still rather have that than not have that guy. So, and, we see it with another program down south in Memphis, which we'll be talking about, with having guys like James Wiseman.
Exactly. And let's get right to the Memphis Tigers. So this week the Tigers nabbed 4-star Sam Ayumude Onu from Pennsylvania. He is one of 3 recent commits to Memphis. The St. Louis forward Jordan Nesbitt picked the Tigers at the beginning of the month. And before that, Pennsylvania forward John Camden, who was playing at Brewster Academy in New Hampshire, he also committed to Memphis. So when you include those guys with Josh Minot, Memphis has a consensus top 3 class for 2021 class so far. But no one and done guys, Kendall. No 5-star guys so far in this class. Do you think that perhaps this crop of players and this group that's coming in for 2021 shows a possible shift in the recruiting strategy for Penny Hardaway? Because since Penny has got there, he's only gone, not to say only, but he's emphasized big game hunting. And we really haven't seen any big game hunting with this particular class.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, obviously, look, they're the number 3 class in the country right now, with the commits of Aomide and Camden and Nesbitt, but it's like you said, it's not the top 10, top 20 one and done type of prospect guys that we would expect from this class. But the shift, I mean, I mentioned it at the top, Mike Miller, not there anymore. Mike Miller was one of the primary guys. Obviously, Penny was big on getting Wiseman, and he's big on getting Moussa Cisse as well. But Mike Miller was kind of the point man on trying to recruit Jalen Green, trying to recruit R.J. Hampton, Matthew Hurt, Boogie Ellis, Precious Achua, Lester Quinones, all those guys. So with Mike Miller not being there, and it's not as if this isn't necessarily a worse strategy, because first of all, there is a sentiment out there that Mike Miller screwed them over by not getting Jalen Green, not getting Matthew Hurt, and not getting R.J. Hampton, and all these guys. This narrative that he may have sold a bill of goods that he couldn't live up to, and they left Memphis, kind of dry. And I think we've seen Penny, the Jalen Green situation especially was a tough one, because he had essentially, from what we understand, basically told them, I'm going there. And then last minute, it was like, nah, actually, I'm going to the G League. You can't have those situations. And, if you're Penny, we've seen them, the guy who's been the point man on pretty much all of these commits has been Cody Topper. And Cody Topper, what's his background? Guy we've had on our show, obviously, his background is player development. And, you see the types of player that they brought in. I mean, Aomide is a 3-star, 4-star kind of center, but, he's a guy with a lot of physical tools and a lot of traits that suggest that you give him time, he could be an NBA player. John Camden has talked about how, he wants to be the next Tyler Hero. And he feels like, Memphis could be that spot where he can develop into a 1 or a 2 and done type of player.
And Camden is a player that he's a fantastic shooter, but he said, look, as a white player, they always want to look at me and say, I'm the shooter. I think I have way more to my game. And I think he's right, too. If you look at looking at his highlight tapes and looking at what he can do, his ball handling, his passing, he is more than a shooter, I think. And it'll be interesting to see how Cody Topper is able to work with him as well.
Yeah, so and then look, I mean, Jordan Nesbitt, I mean, that kid is he's a pit bull. That kid. I was
about to say he's a dog. Yeah,
he's got some dog in him. So, this is gonna be a nice class for Memphis, and I'm not sure if it's done, because like you said, when you talk about the big game hunting, there are 2 guys that are still on Memphis's radar that will be that 5-star. There, obviously, Chet Holmgren is a guy, top 5. Top 2 player in the country, who they're still in the race for. He's been very quiet about where his leanings are. It seems like Gonzaga is out in front, and then Ohio State seems to be in the mix. But we really don't know what the case is with Chet Holmgren, because he seems like he's not even thinking about that. He seems like he's going to wait till the end of the high school season into March, April, which sounds similar to Jalen Green. And he's also he's said recently that he's 99% going to college, but Jalen Green said similar things. So that's always lingering in the background with Chet Holmgren. And then another kid who's committing later this month is Sky Clark, guard from California, who seemed like was going to Kentucky for the last couple of months. But as we talked about in our last show, it seems like once Kenny Payne went to the Knicks, now they've kind of shifted their recruitment a little bit, and they focused a little bit more on Hunter Salas, another guard, which has maybe opened the door for Memphis and North Carolina to really get in there for Sky Clark. So we'll see how that recruitment ends up. But he would be the point guard that they're kind of missing in this class, because that's the one area where you're like, look, if Boogie Ellis had a big year, which he could. I mean, he didn't necessarily look like an NBA player this season, but if he has a big year, he could end up being that. He could end up being an NBA player this season, which is what he projected to be coming out of high school. So if that happens, then they're stuck without Boogie Ellis. You still have Alex Lomax, but the point guard position, Damian Ball's still there as well, but the point guard position, doesn't have that NBA talent. So that would be the one thing that I think this class is missing.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that if somehow they don't end up landing those guys, I wouldn't be surprised also to see Penny go to the transfer wire too.
Yes.
It's not quite something they've taken advantage of just yet, but I would expect Memphis.
Well, they're bringing in Landers Nolly from Virginia Tech this year. Yeah. And we'll see. I mean, I don't know what his we'll see what kind of impact he'll have, but I mean, he's one of the best freshmen in the ACC.
Yeah.
And they're bringing in DeAndre Williams from Evansville, but he's not right as far as we know. He's not eligible right now.
Right.
So I don't know what his deal is going to be, but definitely haven't seen it at the point guard position.
For sure.
It's a totally different animal. Gonzaga, obviously, they've got experience with transfer point guards, but Memphis hasn't brought those types of guys in yet. But it'll be interesting.
And look, I think that what Penny is doing right now makes a lot of sense. I think that to prioritize the solid guys that you're going to need to fill out your roster first probably makes the most sense. Yeah, and then the players that they're going after that are the bigger profile players, those are going to be long recruitments anyway. So you want to kind of have a roster set to go that somehow those guys don't end up coming over. You still have a decent crew. You don't want to put all your eggs in a Chet Holmgren basket or a Sky Clark basket.
Right.
And you didn't do the work to get some of these other kids who certainly look like they have potential to turn out to be really good players. Because, again, as a Gonzaga fan, I mean, I've seen Mark Few turn 3-stars and 4-stars into NBA players and turn those teams into national championship contenders. So you don't have to necessarily grab 2 or 3 5-stars every year to be a national championship contender. Virginia never gets those guys, and they're in it every year.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, or that's what I was going to mention is, like, of the last, when was the last time a team won a national championship with multiple one and dones? Going back to, was it Duke? With Tyus Jones and Jahlil Okafor?
Probably, yeah.
Winslow? That was a long time ago. I could be missing one, but Villanova's won 2.
Villanova, Carolina won 1 with a bunch of seniors.
Yeah, Carolina won 1, and obviously Virginia won most recently. And last year, no champion, but I don't think anybody.
The teams that were projected to win were not teams with one and dones.
Yeah, so it's kind of fool's gold. I mean, if we're being honest,
it is.
Duke has struggled a little bit. Obviously, they had the year with Zion that was great, and I mean, it's great for the profile of the program to have a bunch of one and done guys, have a bunch of NBA players. But, I mean, Memphis even saw this year. They came in with a lot of hype, and obviously they didn't have Wiseman. Not Wiseman. This is a team that people thought was a tournament team, and they didn't really live up to that.
I think the reason why, though, Kendall, is because I think we underestimate how important having team continuity is, especially in college basketball. Yeah. Yes, having the best player still, I'd prefer probably to have that even, but still, especially when you're talking about playing in a tournament style where you're going to be in a lot of very weird positions and things are going to get a lot more intense, having that camaraderie and having that chemistry of guys that have been in that program, have been developed through that program for years and have developed togetherness together with that program is really important. I think that's why you've seen those teams turn that into tournament success, with the teams that have had 1 or 2 or 3 guys who were one and done type 5-star teams. Those teams have often flamed out earlier in the tournament than expected.
And if you're gonna win with 5 stars, as we've seen with Duke and Kentucky, the one time they've won with 5 stars, is you gotta have a plethora of those guys. Like, you can't have, like, Memphis last year built their team around Wiseman, primarily, and then Precious Achiuwa Actually played better when Wiseman left. He started to really spread his wings a little bit. But, they had other guys that were really good but weren't top 10 picks. Like, you got to have multiple lottery picks, multiple first-round picks to win a national championship. You're going to have a bunch of freshmen.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why, the Fab Five are the Fab Five, and they didn't even win that championship. There's a reason why you look at AD's Kentucky team as a historic team. The reason why we look at Duke that year as a historic team, like those were incredible runs, but they're not things that happen often.
It's not easy to get Zion, Barrett, and Reddish.
Yeah, we've been on a one and done era now forever. It's been like a decade. We've one and done.
Yeah, over a decade.
Yeah, and how many of those type of teams have produced national champions? It's very rare.
Yeah.
So we'll see what's happening over with Memphis, and if they end up adding another big name player to this class. But so far, the guys that they've gotten still, I think, Ayumide is definitely more raw, I think, than the other two guys. But
he talks about how he compares himself to Joel Embiid. So, I mean, that could be. I mean, Josh Minot said he's Penny Hardaway 20 years ago. So, I don't know. But regardless, if he's, he also said Boogie Cousins is another guy he compares himself to. So, again, raw player, but he seemed like a guy that really could help them in the years to come. And also the Ayumide thing, being a kid from Africa, you have to feel like the Precious Achua and Musa Cisse line also helped in some regard, I would imagine.
For sure. And lastly today, Kendall, Oregon got to shoot up the team rankings as well after adding 2 top recruits. 4 stars Frank Kepnang and Jonathan Lawson announced they would be heading to Eugene next year. Oregon already has 5-star center Nathan Biddle, who committed to 2021. So, Kendall, Oregon, do they have a case in your mind for being the top recruiting destination out west right now? Because they have a top 5 recruiting class. Dana Altman's done a really great job of recruiting at Oregon now for a while, and there's a consistency there. And I think with what we're seeing at Arizona, which may be the fall off, for being honest, someone's got to take that number 1 spot in terms of recruiting. We know Gonzaga's coming up, but they're still Gonzaga to a certain degree. Do you think Oregon right now is filling that void? UCLA and USC still on the come up.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going off of, it's tough because these recruiting cycles vary year to year. I feel like, if we're going off last season, USC brought in Evan Mobley. He was the best recruit out on the West Coast. Obviously Jalen Green, went to the G League, but Evan Mobley, another California guy, went to USC. If you go the year before that, Arizona brought in Nico Mannion and Josh Green. It really does go year to year, but Oregon does feel like a steady program when it comes to recruiting, where it feels like every year, and it's something that 5-6 years ago used to irk me that Oregon wasn't getting 5 stars because they were recruiting better in football than they were in basketball. And to me, that didn't make any sense because I'm like, the uniforms are cool in football, but basketball, you got sneakers and, you think Nike's influence.
Yeah, you think Nike's influence would be greater for basketball even than it would be for football.
Yeah, you think it'd be greater in basketball would be in football. And we're now finally starting to see the fruits of that relationship. Because now they're starting to recruit like a power program despite not being necessarily a blue blood. Getting guys like Jonathan Lawson and Frank Kepnang are major because those guys aren't local guys. Those guys aren't West Coast guys. Jonathan Lawson's from Memphis. Kepning's from Pennsylvania with the West Town, which is where Cam Reddish and Mo Bamba went to school. These aren't guys from, this isn't them getting Peyton Pritchard from West Lynn, Oregon. This isn't them being in the mix for Kyle Singler and Kevin Love. These are guys from across the nation. And again, this is how they should be recruiting. Nathan Biddle, more close in the region, but in that Pacific Northwest. But and look, Nathan Biddle is a big time player, and Gonzaga tried to get in that recruitment, and all of the Pac-12 schools tried to get in that recruitment, but I think Gonzaga not. I think they were. The fact that Gonzaga didn't really go all in on Biddle is about them trying to get Chet Holmgren. That's my read on the situation.
I agree with that.
Yeah, but Biddle is gonna be he's gonna be a major player in the Pac-12. Definitely has to get stronger. Give you a little bit of Steven Zimmerman vibes, the kid from UNLV years back. But he's a guy you would project to be a one and done type of player. So this is a big get for Oregon. And then the Kepning thing is interesting because it feels as if he is not. The word is that he may be eligible to enroll mid-season this year. So if that's the case, then that would make sense given him and Biddle overlap in terms of their position, both of them being 5 men. And this is a team that last season that didn't have a whole lot of 5s. I mean, they had N'Faly Dante, a big man who came in to replace Bol, and he dealt with situations. He was another guy who had to enroll mid-season, and then didn't really get much of a season because the season was shut down. Not far after that. So he's back, but then now you have Kepning coming off the bench, and it'll be interesting to see how this Oregon team comes into shape. But and then the Lawson thing makes sense because Lawson, obviously, his brother is also at Oregon. And the Lawson family seems to have now decided that as opposed to sending their kids to Memphis, we'll send them to Oregon. However that worked out, I don't know.
There's a lot of kids. There's a lot of kids in that Lawson family. I'm like, Jesus.
Oh yeah.
How many more? Do you have any more coming up?
Yeah, they're the Black Plumleys. Yeah, no. Jonathan is the last one as far as I know.
Shout out to the Lawson family. A lot of rich basketball tradition in there. They should be very proud. Oregon. I mean, they're really starting to become a recruiting giant to me. I mean, you talk about C.J. Walker, and you mentioned Deontay just recently. They have Bol. Forget Luke King. Obviously, they have Peyton. Yeah, obviously they have Peyton Pritchard. Obviously, they have Peyton Pritchard. So, in the last 3 or 4 years, I mean, they've just been a solid team where they're getting 5-star guys, All-American type guys. So, this is starting to become just expected. And because I think there's a lot of uncertainty out west, where does Gonzaga actually stand in regards to this big game hunting recruiting? Are they really in it, or is this kind of a dip in the toe thing in? What is Arizona post this whole scandal? And then, like I said, UCLA, Mick Cronin trying to build that program up.
Yeah.
So, I think right now the West is up for the take in regards to where is the school that all the kids in the West Coast should be looking at in terms of being a top destination. I think that there's absolutely a chance that Oregon could be that school. We saw a kid, a couple of kids that could have gone to West Coast schools go to the G League instead of going to play out West. So I think that I think that there's definitely an opening there.
So I feel like, and it's interesting because Oregon, they're like a weird West Coast school because they're in the Pacific Northwest, and you've seen it in football as well. They don't necessarily prioritize the West Coast as much as other Pac-12
that is true. A lot of guys are named. I mean, King and Bol and a lot of those guys are not West Coast guys.
Not from California or Oregon. I mean, Bol played at Mater Dei for a little bit, but he's from Kansas, and Luke King is from the East Coast, and C.J. Walker from Florida. I mean, these guys, Jonathan Lawson, I mentioned, from Tennessee.
Exactly.
They're not necessarily prioritizing California kids, but they have that luxury because they're kind of a national brand with the Nike thing and, the uniforms and, the Oregon swag that kind of comes with it. But, if we're talking about it, like a West Coast schools that get West Coast kids, I think it's still UCLA and USC. Or I would say still because it has been Arizona. Obviously it's the last 6-7 years it's been Arizona. We're starting to see a shift. I mean, getting Mannion and getting Josh Green was great, but look, Mannion is a local kid. I mean, he wasn't going anywhere else. So obviously, great getting Nico Mannion. But as we've seen going forward, the California guys, Mobley going to USC. I mean, Dacian Nix, not from California, but he was gonna go to UCLA before he went to the G League. But then we also saw Peyton Watson, a kid we didn't talk about on the show, but 5-star out of Long Beach, who committed to UCLA over pretty much over Kentucky, over Gonzaga, over Oregon, I believe. So, you know, I would still be concerned about Mick Cronin and Andy Enfield out in the West Coast. But the West Coast, as you've seen, and look, can't sleep on Bobby Hurley. You know Bobby bleeping Hurley.
I was gonna say because you know he got the best kid on the wall right now.
Yeah, Jacob, the best freshman in college basketball from the West Coast.
Yeah,
playing out in Tempe.
Yeah. So,
you know, that's not something we've heard since a certain bearded one. You know, about 13, 11 years ago, it feels like. So, yeah, it certainly will be interesting to see how this whole West Coast situation shakes out. What's your take on Gonzaga and where they stack up? Because we had an interesting text conversation a couple days ago where we talked about how Washington, their series with Gonzaga is not a thing anymore this season, and how, you know, it would be nice to see Oregon and Gonzaga play because those seem to be the two teams.
Yeah, they seem to be more of the same weight class. You know, it's funny the way it worked out. You know, Washington is upset at the Pac-12 in terms of the late call in terms of basketball being postponed to the new year, and that left Washington in a tough bind with their scheduling conflicts, and one of the big ones is Gonzaga, and that's a game that they really, really want to have, and which is crazy for me to say because, like, I remember when Washington did not want to have anything to do with Gonzaga for a long time. Now there's a game they desperately want to get on the schedule, and they can't. And Gonzaga, who no longer needs Washington, is just like, no, we're good. We don't need to play you. We'll see you, some other time. And it's just crazy to see those roles flipped. In terms of where Gonzaga stands out west, I mean, you know, to me, Gonzaga is the best program out west. But because and I think right now they're in kind of a little bit of like this identity crisis because they're the best program out west. There's no denying that. Every time they play about 3 or 4 Pac-12 teams every year, and they beat all of them every single year. At least the last 3 or 4 years, they've gone undefeated. So I think the only loss they had I can remember from a Pac-12 team was TJ F. McConnell, which was like 4 or 5 years ago, in a very close game. In
that Stanley Johnson.
Stanley Johnson might have been there. I don't remember for sure, but that was a really good game. That one of the better games of that season. That was in Arizona. That was in Tempe. But
it was either Johnson or Aaron Gordon.
Yeah, but either way, like they're kind of in a little bit of identity crisis because they've gotten Jalen Suggs, they've gotten Zach Collins, they've gotten some big time recruits, but you know they haven't put together any kind of crazy recruiting class that's, you know, encapsulated, you know, 2 or 3 5-star kind of guys. Now they've recruited very well, and what they've shown is Gonzaga, I think in terms of player development, is the best in the country because they're getting 4-star guys, 3-star guys, and those guys again are turning into NBA kind of players, or at least All-American college basketball players. And what Markey's doing down there is exceptional. But in terms of the recruiting landscape, I just think because, you know, Nike certainly has invested a lot in Gonzaga more in recent years, but it's still not going to invest as much in Gonzaga as it does in SC or Oregon. It's not going to invest as much as Adidas is investing in UCLA. So it's just
whoever invests in UCLA. I mean,
well, yeah. Right now, UCLA is a free agent, which is just they're athletic. And shout out to Mick Cronin because he did a great job. There's no shade to him. But their athletic department is a disaster. And
what's
it's like the fact that they're getting any players right now. It's like the program is running itself. Like they don't like, it's crazy.
What are their uniforms gonna look like?
We don't know. Can they just use the old? I mean,
like we get that free press.
I mean, I would think that they probably have to take off the logo and just.
I mean, Under Armour is gonna be like, fine, y'all can wear the logo. We're just not gonna pay you for it. You guys can wear the jersey.
That's true. Yeah, you would think that you just wear the jersey.
We'll take the free advertising money. Yeah, I don't know what they're gonna do. It's a mess. I haven't heard anything about Nike signing with them or whatchamacallit. Under Armour basically said that was just bad money. That we gave you guys all this money and you guys stink in both football and basketball.
It is bad money right now.
So we're gonna take that back.
Yeah, it is.
Which I think they could do, but they.
But you know, I tell you what though, I do. You know, I told you I was way higher on Mick Cronin higher than you were. I feel good about Cronin getting that school back to respectability.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Coach O, the Coach O thing that you had. It's he's a different personality, obviously, but you know, the personality kind of reminds me of Chip Kelly. You know, that's the kind of, not Chip Kelly.
I mean, to be honest, I feel like with Cronin, you know, it feels to me a lot like what happened with Ben Holland. Like it seems like when Ben Holland came, it was the same issues. They were soft, and they didn't play hard, and they had a lot of entitled guys on their roster. And Holland came in. First year was rough. He had to get rid of a bunch of guys. But you know what? He brought that Pittsburgh toughness to UCLA, and then UCLA became one of the toughest teams in the country. And they went to the Final Four. And Ben Holland did a phenomenal job. I know it didn't end well, but, you know, the guys have their runs. He had a really great run when he first got there. I think Cronin, it looks like he's on the same path. Came in, had a bunch of untitled, lazy guys. Had to weed some guys out, find the guys that wanted to play, and by the time they got to conference play, they were just punching people in the face. And you know what? Like in that conference, that's all you need. Like the Pac-12 is not the Big East. You don't have to be this like rough and tumble, biggest, toughest guy in the world to be a tough team in that conference. You know what I'm saying? Like. Yeah. Just want it more, and you will be the toughest team. You know,
Mick Cronin's probably saying, "Man, if I had those dudes I had at Cincinnati, I had Yancey Gates, whatever the dude's name was,
they look like the Bad Boy Pistons playing the Pac-12. You know,
like if I had that crew, oh man, we would have went undefeated this conference.
Yancey Nates and Lance Stevenson. I mean, come on.
Yeah, and we would have won based on talent. We would just scare the other team off the court.
Yeah, man. You know. Yeah, so Rick Cronin, I feel like he's on the right path in terms of the kind of team he's building down there. And shout out to Cronin. We got to talk to him a little bit. He's a really good guy, and I'm hopeful.
Very good.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that things work out in the West. But the West is just so fascinating because I feel like now it's been about, I think you could really say now about 20 years where we keep asking, yo, what's up with the West? Like, why isn't there any real power in the Pac-12? You know, or multiple powers in the Pac-12 that we're talking about for national championship contention every year. It's been a long time. And again, we had the Howland run for that short period, and that's really the only team we've had.
Miller in the Elite Eight every year.
Yeah, he didn't get to the Final Four, so I'm not even including him. Sorry, like he had great teams, but they didn't win anything of even. They didn't come close. So
yeah,
like we're talking now for a long time. And maybe 20 years is harsh, but I think 10 years is not harsh. Like, of what's up with the West? Why is we looking at the Pac-12 and the highest seed in the tournament we're going to get is a 4 seed or a 5 seed? That sounds ridiculous, but that's been normal for the last.
The one school we're leaving out. The one school we're leaving out, you know, before we close out is the Stanford Cardinal. You know, Gerard Haas. You know, we mentioned, you know, a couple months ago, obviously they brought in Zaire Williams, which was a big kid from Sierra Canyon. But then they've brought in. They got a recent commit from Harrison Ingram, a 5-star from Texas, another wing, and they also got a point guard, Issa Silva, from California as well, coming in, a 4-star kid. So, you know, Stanford, you know, may be a sleeping giant, you know, in the West Coast. We're not talking about them now, but depending on what they do with Zaire Williams this season, you know, we saw what they had. Obviously, what they had with Tyrell Terry. They didn't really win a lot of games with Tyrell Terry, but it goes back to the point I made about J.D. Davison. Sometimes you have those point guards or those players that, you know, are one and done. You don't really win a lot of games with them, but, you know, Tyrell Terry might be a lottery pick. Now, all of a sudden, the profile of the program is like, whoa, they've got some things going on there. I mean, Tyrell Terry was there, and they're going to have Zaire Williams next year be a lottery pick. You know, I would look out for Stanford. And, you know, in these days of player empowerment and these guys, you know, being a little smarter about the choices they make, you know, guys are going to realize, you know, Stanford, I mean, you know, should I go to Stanford or Arizona? I mean, maybe I should go to Stanford.
I'll tell you what, I know Mike Montgomery doesn't get enough credit for what he did at Stanford in that window he was there. I mean, he turned them into a national power.
Yeah, the Josh Childress days.
You know, like
so that's what reminded me. when you talked about that era, I was like, who else was good? I was like, well, Stanford was good, and they might
Stanford
be good
was
now.
yeah, Stanford was really really good for a while, and it's crazy because they did not have a lot of basketball history before then, and there wasn't a lot of history after then. And they've had good coaches after Montgomery. Trent Johnson was a good coach. Johnny Dawkins, it was his first job, so maybe he had growing pains, but we know he's a good coach. And they just, it doesn't matter who's been there, they haven't quite been able to capture that energy. But you would think, again, Northern California, plenty of hoopers there. It's Stanford, so getting
look
kids
what David
to
Shaw has done
there.
in terms of cornering that market of like being the smart school in the West Coast.
Yeah, I think that Stanford a little bit of a sleeping giant for sure. I think Stanford and Cal. I think both of them. Like, there's no reason to me that either one of those teams shouldn't be better. Great location, great campuses. Obviously, there is the gap of the academic gap that you just have to fill. But
Cal, that didn't stop Quanzo Morin from getting Jaylen Brown.
You can still get good players. Like, it's just
you gotta find a certain type of guy.
Yeah, and I think it just takes the right person in the job. The job isn't gonna just do itself, but the right person can make either of those programs top programs.
Again, if you've seen an interview with Zaire Williams, you've seen an interview with Harrison Ingram, those guys are guys where you're like, yeah, I can see why that guy's going to Stanford. And that's something that is that goes to the recruiting strategy. Finding guys where you're like, this guy would want to play at Stanford. Not everybody wants to play at Stanford. Not everybody cares, but some guys do care. And I think we're going to see more and more guys in the future care about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's less about looking at that academic hurdle as a crutch and actually using it to your strength. Because how many of these guys end up who Stanford makes a lot of sense for them, and they're going to schools that don't stimulate them in an academic or intellectual
way. And Duke has used that to an advantage for years.
Yeah, they've been the master of that.
Every time a kid commits to Duke, they're like, yeah, I was told about the network. When I'm out of school, I'm gonna have a network for years to come. I mean, it's like, why didn't Stanford use it?
Yeah,
maybe
Stanford, come on. Yeah, exactly. It's
the same thing. Yeah. It's bigger.
In fact, really, before basketball, you would think that Duke is actually Stanford East. It seems like a no-brainer. But
shout out Johnny Dawkins, man. Big Spider-Man fan.
Yes, he is a big Spider-Man fan, as we learned in our conversation with him last year. But or this was it this year? No, it was last year. This pandemic has been. No, it was last year. It was around this time last year. In fact, it might be today. Literally, could be the anniversary when we're recording this. It was around this time. But
yeah, you're right. Man, this has been a long
it's really close.
year.
It's been a long year, yo. It's crazy. Anyway, thank you guys so much for checking out this episode of the Uncommitted, episode 6. I know we were a little bit late on this one, but with the NBA playoffs and NBA draft prep, it got pushed back just a little bit. But I think this was still a great show, so hope you guys enjoyed it. You can catch all of our podcasts. That obviously you can catch us on YouTube with this podcast, but all of our other podcasts you can check out on the New Generation Podcast Network. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and TuneIn. You can catch our Sports Talk podcast, Hero Talk, and our Star Wars podcast, The Imperial Broadcast. Also, catch us on social media. I'm on Twitter, EJ_Stewart, and Instagram, ActionEJ. You can catch Kendall on Twitter, at NewGenKen, and for the channel, we are on Facebook, New Generation Media, on Twitter, New Generation Pod, and on Instagram, New Generation Podcast. That's going to do it for now. Thank you guys so much for checking us out. Kendall, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace.